When my husband Marcus walked into his study, he didn't find his supportive, bored, retired wife. He found me, sitting in his $1,000 leather chair. On his polished desk, I'd laid out the evidence: a single pharmacy bag and one bank statement. He tried to laugh it off. "Alara, what is this?" Playing detective. My voice was flat. "I'm done playing, Marcus. Who is C. Mason? And why have we been paying her $2,000 a month? For 15 years. To live inside our wall." His face went white. That explosion was the end of a 30-year lie. But to understand how we got there, you have to understand how the first crack appeared. It all started 3 months ago, with a simple phone call while I was just trying to buy paper towels. I was in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon rush at Costco. The place was a cathedral of concrete and fluorescent lights, the air thick with the smell of industrial-sized sheet cake and hot dog water. I was mentally calculating if I had the pantry space for a 48-pack of paper towels when my phone buzzed. I didn't recognize the number. I pushed my oversized cart to a quiet corner between a mountain of dog beds and a pallet of canned tuna, and answered. "Hello, Mrs. Scott? This is Dave from ADT Security." My stomach did that familiar, unwelcome lurch. The kind you get when the IRS sends a certified letter. "Is everything okay? Is the alarm going off?" No, nothing like that, ma'am. It's just, we're getting a series of odd motion sensor pings. They're coming from the north wing zone of your property." I gripped the metal bar of the cart, my knuckles turning white. "The north wing." "Ma'am," he asked. "Oh," I said, trying to sound normal. "That's impossible. That wing is sealed." "Yes, ma'am. That's what our records show. Your husband, Mr. Scott, requested that zone be put on low-priority monitoring about 15 years back, said it was under permanent renovation and structurally unsound. But these pings are pretty consistent. Every night, right around 2 a.m., he gave a little just a guy doing his job chuckle. I told him back then, "Mr. Scott, you're going to get squirrels in there." But I gotta log the call. "You sure no one's getting in? A homeless person, maybe." The noise of the store, the rumble of flatbeds, the high-pitched beep of a forklift, it all faded. All I could hear was the blood rushing in my ears. Every night. Round 2 a.m., I cleared my throat. "No, Dave, it's just rats. It's a 150-year-old house. It's always rats. Rats, squirrels, raccoons. Yeah, that'll do it. Well, just wanted to let you know. I'll make a note that it's just critters. You have a good one, Mrs. Scott." The line clicked. I stood there for a full minute, staring at a box of 90-count fruit roll-ups. Renovation. That renovation had been my husband's very first project when we bought this house. Marcus, my husband, was Marcus Scott. The visionary architect. The man who Architectural Digest had called a genius for his ability to blend historic preservation with stark, beautiful modernism. Our house was his masterpiece, his calling card. But the north wing, that was his one noble failure. "The foundation is just powder, Alara," he'd told me, all those years ago. "The original builders cut corners. It's a structural nightmare. We'd spend $1 million just to make it safe. So we'd sealed it, locked it. A massive 1,200 square foot section of our home cut off like a gangrenous limb. For 15 years, it had been a ghost space, a silent, dust-filled tomb. And now, there were pings. I abandoned the cart, paper towels and all, and walked out. The drive home was a blur. I kept seeing the north wing in my head, the heavy oak door at the end of the upstairs hallway, the antique, oversized brass padlock that secured it. Marcus kept the only key, just in case. When I pulled into our long, crushed stone driveway, the house looked perfect. It always did. White columns, perfect black shutters, gardens that were impeccably maintained. It was a fortress of good taste and success. I found Marcus in his study. The room was his real home. It smelled of old books, expensive drafting paper, and the faint, citrusy scent of the tea he drank. He was bent over his massive, custom-built desk, a delicate silver pencil gliding over a huge sheet of paper. He was designing the new city museum. He was in his element. I stood in the doorway for a moment, just watching him. The silence of the house was absolute. "Hey," I said. He didn't look up. My voice came out thin. "I got a weird call today, from ADT Security." That made him pause. The pencil hovered. He didn't turn, but I could feel his attention shift, like a heavy spotlight. And they said they're getting motion sensor alerts from the north wing. I waited. I don't know what I expected. Surprise? Concern? And oh my God, we have to check. Marcus let out a short, sharp puff of air. It was a laugh. He set his pencil down, aligning it perfectly parallel with the edge of his green drafting mat. Then he turned in his $1,000 ergonomic chair. Raccoons, he said. What? Raccoons, Elara. He smiled. It was the smile he saved for clients who suggested a bad paint color. Patient, patronizing, and utterly final. We live in Savannah. We're surrounded by 200-year-old oak trees. It's a 150-year-old house. It's raccoons. They found a gap in the old stone foundation. I crossed my arms. The man said they were consistent. Every night, around 2 a.m. That doesn't sound like a raccoon. Honey. Marcus stood up and walked over to me. He was a tall man, and he used his height to great effect. He put his warm, heavy hands on my shoulders. They're animals. They're nocturnal. They are consistently nocturnal. I'll go to Home Depot tomorrow. I'll get the biggest have-a-heart trap they sell, and I'll relocate the whole furry family. Problem solved. I looked up at him. His eyes were so clear, so blue, so reasonable. But the wing is sealed. How did they— Elara, he sighed. He squeezed my shoulders, then started to gently massage the tension out of my neck. It was a move he'd used 1,000 times, one that simultaneously soothed me and shut me down. You've got too much time on your hands. That's all this is. I stiffened. What does that mean? It means, he said, his voice dropping into that gentle, I'm the smart one tone, that since you took early retirement, you're at loose ends. You're bored. And when you're bored, you get jumpy. You're inventing mysteries. It's a sealed wing in an old house. It's raccoons. End of story. He gave me a quick, dismissive kiss on the forehead, his lips barely grazing my skin. Now, if you'll excuse me, he said, turning back to his desk, I'm trying to solve an actual structural problem for the city museum. This beam is giving me hell. I was dismissed. I backed out of the study, pulling the heavy door closed. The click of the expensive latch was the only sound. I walked down the long, magnificent hallway to the kitchen, the antique floorboards silent under my feet. I made a cup of tea, my hands moving on autopilot. Jumpy. Bored. He was right. I was retired. But I wasn't bored. For 35 years, I had been a forensic accountant, a CPA. My entire life, my entire professional identity was built on finding the one, tiny, microscopic number that didn't add up. My job was to find the raccoons in the financial statements. I found the ghost employees. I found the skimming accounts. I found the rounding errors that were actually multi-million-dollar embezzlements. My brain was trained to see a ping and not accept the easy answer. I looked down the hall, past the grand staircase, to the far end of the house, to the dark, solid oak door with the brass padlock. He'd said he'd get a trap. He'd never once suggested that he, unlock the door and go look. He'd called me jumpy. I took a sip of my tea. It was scalding hot, and it grounded me. Maybe he was right. Maybe it was just raccoons. But as I stood there in the vast, silent kitchen, a cold, hard little thought, the kind of thought I'd built my career on, began to form. Something didn't add up. And if there's one thing I know how to do, it's follow the numbers. For 35 years, I was the one they called when the numbers didn't just talk, they confessed. I wasn't just a CPA, I was a priestess of the balance sheet. I could find a single phantom decimal point in a 200-page SEC filing. I could smell a padded expense report from 3 offices away. My brain was a fine-tooled instrument built for one purpose: to find the discrepancy, to find the lie. And my husband, in one 5-minute dismissive conversation, had reduced me to a jumpy housewife who was at loose ends. That was his mistake. He hadn't just patronized me. He'd insulted my pride. He'd challenged my competence. So I gave myself a new retirement project. I was going to conduct a full-scale, forensic audit of our entire life, starting with the house. If I was going to be the bored, retired woman, I was going to play the part. The next morning, I announced I was finally going to tackle our home insurance and property taxes. About time we got our affairs in order, I said brightly over coffee. I need to do a full inventory for the new policy. Might even check if the county has us appraised too high. Marcus, barely looking up from the Wall Street Journal, just grunted. Knock yourself out, honey. Just don't buy any more of those organizing bins. We have enough. See? I was invisible. A harmless hobbyist. But I wasn't interested in the household receipts. I was interested in the house itself. The asset. An asset that, according to the security company, was not behaving as documented. I didn't ask Marcus for his blueprints. That would be tipping my hand. He'd want to help. He'd want to explain things, to walk me through his vision. No, I didn't want his version of the truth. I wanted the original. 2 hours later, I was at the Savannah-Chatham County Hall of Records. The air in the records room was thick with the smell of old, acidic paper, dust, and industrial-strength floor wax. A young clerk with a bored expression barely looked up as I requested the parcel number for our property. I spent the next hour scrolling through grainy microfilm, the rhythmic whir-click of the machine, the only sound, until I found it. The original 1,890 architectural drawings. I paid $10 to have them printed on the large format plotter. The machine groaned and hissed, and slowly, like a secret being forced into the light, it spat out 3 enormous, brittle, pale blue sheets. They were beautiful, true cyanotypes, the lines white like ghosts against a deep blue background. I drove home, the rolled-up plan sitting on the passenger seat like a silent witness. Marcus was gone, off to the museum site for the day. The house was mine. I went straight to the kitchen, to our massive 12-foot granite island. I unrolled the 1,890 blueprints, using my coffee mug and a banana bunch to weigh down the curling, ancient corners. The old, spidery script was hard to read, but the lines were clear. This was the house, as it was born. Now, for the lie. I went into his study. The room was immaculate, and there, hanging on the wall like a piece of modern art, was a framed copy of his 2005 renovation plan. His vision. His sterile, white, computer-aided design, all sharp angles and confident black lines. His name was printed in bold, minimalist font in the corner. Marcus Scott, AIA. I carefully unhooked the heavy frame, my heart hammering. This felt like a betrayal. I was in his sacred space, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he had already betrayed me. I carried the heavy frame back to the kitchen and laid it directly beside the old cyanotypes. The truth and the lie, side by side. My CPA brain took over. Reconcile the accounts, I whispered to myself. I wasn't looking for raccoons anymore. I was looking for fraud. I started with the main house. Living room, dining room, kitchen. The old spidery script labeled it Cold Pantry and Suite, QTRS. A room. A real, defined, structural room. A room with a door, 2 small windows, and even, I noted, a small ventilation shaft. I stared at the spot, my blood turning to ice water. I looked back at Marcus's plan. There was nothing. Not an X for demolition, not a dotted line for sealed off. It was a solid, black, load-bearing wall, an impossibility. An architect of Marcus's precision, a man who built his entire reputation on historic accuracy, doesn't just miss a room. He doesn't accidentally draw a solid wall where a room exists. You do that. You do that on purpose. You do that if you want the room to vanish from the record. You do that if you want to erase it. I stood up, my breath shallow. The call from ADT, the pings. I ran to my office and grabbed the file from our last ADT service. I ripped out the customer map, the one that showed the placement of every sensor. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely hold the paper. I brought it to the kitchen island and laid it on top of the blueprints. I aligned the 3 documents, the 1,890, truth, the 2005, lie, and the 2025 alarm. The sensor, a small circle marked M5, was not in the foundation. It was floating in the exact center of the 12x12 space, floating in the middle of the cold pantry, floating in the middle of Marcus's solid wall. The pings weren't from raccoons in the foundation. They were from inside a room that, according to my genius husband, didn't exist. I stood there in the vast, silent kitchen, staring at the 3 documents spread across the granite island. The 1890, truth, the 2005 lie, and the ADT alarm. My entire body was thrumming, like I'd grabbed a live wire. For 35 years, I'd been a forensic accountant. I'd built a career on the cold, hard certainty that numbers don't lie, people do. And the blueprints screamed. My first instinct, the one born from a lifetime of audits, was to secure the evidence. My hands trembled as I carefully rolled up the 1,890 cyanotypes, securing them with a rubber band. I didn't hide them in my office. He might neaten it. I hid them in the pantry, inside an empty, oversized oatmeal container, an invisible asset. Then, I took his framed vision, his architectural lie, and hung it back on the wall of his study. I wiped my fingerprints off the frame with my sleeve. The smell of his citrus tea and old paper hung in the air, and for the first time, it felt like the lair of a stranger. That night, my performance began. I was no longer Eleanor, the supportive wife. I was Alara, the undercover auditor. Marcus came home, flush with success from the museum pitch. He was expansive, charming, full of himself. The board loved the new atrium concept, Alara. They were eating out of my hand. We're celebrating. Get dressed. I'm taking you to that new French place. He stood there, beaming, waiting for his applause. A week ago, I would have gushed. I would have felt that familiar, second-hand pride in his accomplishments. Now, I just looked at his face, the lines of genius around his eyes, and all I could see was the solid black wall he had drawn over a 12x12 room. I'm a little tired, Marcus, I said, forcing a weak smile. Just a headache, maybe tomorrow. He let out that puff of air, the one I now recognized as his dismissal sound. See? Jumpy. You need to get out more, Alara, all this time cooped up in the house. It's not good for you. You're starting to imagine things. I just nodded, lowering my eyes. You're probably right, honey. The ease with which the lie slid off my tongue terrified me. My new routine started the next morning. I told Marcus I was getting into an early morning walking routine. Another lie. My retirement project was no longer the insurance policy, it was the house itself. As an accountant, I know that to find the truth, you don't look at the business, you look at the expenses, you follow the money. In a house, you follow the trash. It's where the truth ends up. The receipts, the wrappers, the evidence of consumption. Our house had 2 systems. The kitchen trash, which our housekeeper handled twice a week, and the big municipal bins, the massive, bright blue recycling bin and the matching black trash bin, waiting at the side of the house for pickup. Tuesday was trash day. I woke at 5 a.m. before the sun. The air was thick and damp, that classic Savannah humidity. The streetlights cast a hazy orange glow. I pulled on my sneakers, bypassed the front door, and went out through the mudroom. I felt ridiculous. I was a respected professional, a woman who had managed multi-million-dollar accounts, and here I was, about to become a crazy lady rooting through her own garbage. This was what he had reduced me to. I put on a pair of heavy-duty gardening gloves, my heart hammering a sick rhythm against my ribs. I wheeled the heavy bins down the crushed stone path, closer to the privacy of the garage. First, the blue recycling bin. I opened the lid. The smell of stale beer and old paper hit me. I sifted through it. Just what I expected. Amazon boxes, his Wall Street Journal back issues, my Architectural Digest magazines, wine bottles. Nothing. My breath hitched. Okay. The black bin. The real trash. I lifted the lid. This was it. I took a deep breath, held it, and plunged my gloved hands in. I dug past the first bag, our housekeeper's, full of kitchen scraps. Coffee grounds, onion skins, chicken wrappers, the normal rotting evidence of a life, and then I felt it. Near the bottom, completely separate, was a small white plastic grocery bag, tied off neatly with a double knot. This was not our housekeeper's bag. She used the black hefty liners. This was separate, deliberate. My fingers, clumsy in the thick gloves, fumbled with the knot. I finally tore it open. Inside were 4 small rectangular tin cans. Oily. The labels were bright, graphic, and expensive. I recognized them. Not from Publix or Kroger. These were from the gourmet deli downtown, the one that charges $14 for a 3-ounce tin. Spanish sardines in olive oil. Italian anchovies, packed in salt. I stood there, frozen, the cold, greasy tins in my hand. The world tilted. This was impossible. This was completely, absolutely, fundamentally impossible. Marcus, my husband, was violently allergic to seafood. I'm not talking I get a little rash allergic. I'm talking anaphylactic shock, carry an EpiPen or die allergic. I had a flash, sharp as a camera strobe, of a dinner party 15 years ago. A new client, the client's wife, so proud, serving a Caesar salad made from scratch with real anchovy paste. Marcus had taken one single polite bite. I spent the next 4 hours in the St. Joseph's emergency room while they pumped him full of steroids and epinephrine, his face swollen into an unrecognizable mask, his breath whistling in his throat. He had almost died. From that day on, our house was a no-fly zone for fish. I didn't cook it. We didn't order it. He wouldn't even walk past the seafood counter at the grocery store. And here, in a secret, separate trash bag, was a small fortune in gourmet tinned fish. Raccoons. His voice echoed in my head. It's raccoons, Alara. A hysterical, sharp laugh almost bubbled out of me. What, were we being burgled by raccoons with a gourmet palate? Raccoons who had developed a taste for cured European seafood? This was the second discrepancy. The blueprint was the accounts payable error. This was the physical cash in hand. This was the fraud. I shoved the tins back into the bag, tied the knot, and buried it deep, just as the distant, grinding rumble of the garbage truck turned onto our street. The evidence would be gone in minutes. I didn't care. I had the fact. Now, I had to see the lie. I had to test the oddity. That evening, I was in the kitchen. I was playing the role of the retired wife to the hilt, trying a new, complicated recipe from Bon Appetit. Marcus came in, loosening his tie. "Smells good, honey. Hard day." "Marcus," I said. My voice was casual, light. I didn't turn from the stove. "Quick question. I was at that gourmet shop on Broughton today. Did you buy anchovies?" The sizzle of the onions in the pan was the only sound, a slow, hot sizzle. Behind me, the silence stretched. 1 second. 2. 3. He finally chuckled. It was a practiced, easy sound. "God, no. The smell? Are you kidding me? You know I can't even be in the same room as that stuff." "Oh," I said, stirring. "That's so weird. I could have sworn I saw some of those expensive Spanish tins in the recycling this morning." Another beat of silence. This one was different. This one was working. "Ah," he said. That was the sound of a man finding his footing on a slippery rock. Right. That. I knew that would. I forgot to tell you. I turned, holding the wooden spoon, my face a mask of neutral curiosity. Forgot what? He waved his hand, leaning against the counter, regaining his master of the universe pose. "My new doctor, with my cholesterol numbers from my last physical. He said I need more omega-3 seconds." Aggressively, he was warming up. The lie was getting detailed. "He said fish oil pills are basically garbage," he continued, "and he said I should try eating the source." I just stared. The source, as in fish. "Right," he said, snapping his fingers. "Obviously, I can't eat fish, but he said these high-end, salt-cured anchovies, the protein is broken down differently. The allergens are neutralized, or something. He said to try just a tiny bit, see if I could tolerate it. My blood was ice. And could you— Nope. He faked a shiver of disgust. Tried a microscopic piece. Hated it. Tasted like salty. Well, I just tossed the rest. Complete waste of money, but doctor's orders. What can you do? He smiled, the case-closed smile. So, no, my brief, disgusting fish-eating experiment is over. You are safe from the smell. He patted me on the arm, grabbed a seltzer from the fridge, and walked out, back to the safety of his study. I stood motionless. The wooden spoon in my hand was dripping. My CPA brain was screaming. It wasn't just a lie. It was a brilliant lie. It was specific. It was medical, it was plausible, but it was a lie. A doctor doesn't tell a man with a documented anaphylactic allergy to try a little anchovy. They would be sued for malpractice before he even left the office. They'd prescribe a plant-based omega-3 like flaxseed or algae oil. And the tins. I'd seen 4 of them. He said he'd tried a microscopic piece and tossed the rest. The tins I'd held in my hand were empty, scraped, clean. He was lying. He was lying to my face with the casual confidence of a man who had been doing it for a very, very long time. He was feeding a secret in the house, a secret that didn't exist, in a room that was gone, was eating $14 tins of imported anchovies in the middle of the night. I wasn't jumpy. I wasn't bored. I was being played. And my husband was a very good liar. I just had to be a better accountant. He was a very good liar. I just had to be a better accountant. And a good forensic accountant knows you don't just audit the current quarter. You don't just find the lie about the anchovies. I knew. This was it. The big one. The cover story. I left it on the massive, reclaimed wood coffee table in the living room. The one I had found at a salvage yard and he'd reimagined. When Marcus came home, he didn't say anything at first. He just orbited it. He poured his usual seltzer. He loosened his tie. He checked his phone. But his eyes kept flicking to it. "Oh, look," I said, my voice dripping with fake, wifely surprise. "Honey, it's here." He picked it up, acting as if it weighed nothing, as if this wasn't the moment he'd been working for his entire life. "Ah, good. About time." He opened it, right to the centerfold. There he was. A full, 2-page spread. A photo of Marcus, standing in his study. He wasn't smiling. He was contemplating. One hand was on his chin, the other held his silver pencil, poised over the blueprints for the museum. The light from the antique desk lamp hit his graying temples just right. He looked like a Roman senator. He looked like a genius. The title, in a huge, elegant font, read, "The Visionary of Savannah, Marcus Scott's Historic Revival." The article was breathtaking. It was a love letter. It praised his uncompromising vision, his intellectual rigor, his almost spiritual connection to the bones of old buildings. It talked about how he'd single-handedly revived the historic district. It called our house his opening thesis, his masterpiece. "Well," he said, closing the magazine with a soft, expensive thud. He placed it back on the table, cover facing out. "We're celebrating. Open that bottle of Chateauneuf-du-Pape, the 09. I went to the wine fridge. The 09, the $300 bottle we were saving. Apparently his ego had just matured. He poured 2 glasses, his hand steady. He raised his glass to me. The heavy crystal chimed as he held it up. "To this," he said, gesturing at the magazine cover. "To vision, to finally being recognized for the work." He paused, taking a deep, satisfied breath. "It wasn't easy. But God, we built this from nothing. We." My hand froze, the glass halfway to my lips. "We." That one tiny 2-letter word hit me like a physical slap. We built this. And just like that, I wasn't in our magnificent, high-ceilinged living room anymore. I was 28 years old, in a cramped beige cubicle under the buzzing fluorescent hell of a 2 a.m. office light. It was April 12th, tax season. My back was a knot of fire, my eyes burned from staring at green bar ledger paper, and the air was thick with the smell of stale coffee and the sulfur scent of the microwaved cupo noodles I'd had for dinner. I was listening to the clack, clack, clack of my 10-key calculator, my fingers flying over it, auditing the books of a mid-level regional tire distributor. That was my vision. Marcus, back then, was all vision. He was an artist, he'd said. He didn't do budgets. Budgets were restrictive. He needed freedom to create. So I gave it to him. I remembered his first big vision, a modernist strip mall in a part of town that didn't want it. It sat 90% empty for 2 years. His eco-condo project, the one he built with experimental bamboo flooring, it had failed inspection so badly it had to be gutted. He was the artist. I was the one who dealt with the creditors. I was the one who, after my 60-hour work week at the firm, took on side work. I spent my weekends untangling the fraudulent books of a cash-only barbecue chain just so we could make the mortgage payment. Our mortgage payment. I was the one who took my entire year-end bonus, the one I'd earned from finding a $1.2 million rounding error in a client's shipping department, and didn't put it in our 401k. I didn't buy a new car. I didn't even buy a new suit. I used it to pay off the second lien on his failed condo project. I'd quietly covered his payroll for his 2 unpaid interns for 6 months. I wasn't just working 80-hour weeks. I was funding his genius. "Just give me 5 years, Alara," he'd say, his eyes burning with that vision everyone loved so much. 5 years to build my portfolio. I just need the chance to show them what I can do. Then you can relax. I'll take care of you. I looked at him, standing there in the present, bathed in the soft, expensive light of our living room. It had been 30 years. His portfolio was built. His name was on the cover of Architectural Digest. And we had built this. I looked at the picture of him in his study, the custom-built cherry bookshelves, the $1,000 ergonomic chair, the imported desk lamp. My 80-hour weeks had paid for that chair. My tax season-fueled exhaustion had paid for those books. I was the silent, invisible investor. I was the structural beam in the foundation that he had plastered over and called his. I was the asset he had leveraged to build his entire, beautiful, fraudulent life. "Drink up, honey." He smiled at me over the rim of his glass. "You earned this too." My face felt like a mask. I didn't know what it was doing. I hoped it was smiling. "Yes," I said, my voice a stranger's. I did. I raised my glass. "To your vision, Marcus. You're an inspiration." I finally took a sip of the $300 wine. It was bitter. It tasted like ash. And as I lowered the glass, I made a silent mathematical promise to the 2 8-year-old girl in that cubicle. I wasn't just an accountant. I was a liquidator. And I was coming to collect. But a good liquidator, a good auditor, doesn't just show up with a moving truck. It's not a smash and grab. It's a methodical, legal, and inescapable dismantling. The first step, before you seize the assets, is to get the suspect to lie on the record. You document the fraud. I'd found the discrepancy in the blueprints. I'd found the unexplainable expense in the trash. Now, I needed to give my visionary husband one more chance to hang himself with his own arrogance. I needed to see what would happen if I, the jumpy, bored wife, stopped acting jumpy and started asking questions he couldn't just brush off. I decided to stop being a ghost in my own home and confront the architect himself, not with fear, but with logic. I found him where he always was, in his sanctuary. The study. He was bathed in the warm, focused glow of his ridiculously expensive brass and walnut desk lamp. The Architectural Digest was still on the coffee table, a silent, smug monument to his success, placed at a perfect 45-degree angle. He was sketching, that signature silver pencil, the one that cost more than my first car moving across a vast sheet of vellum. I didn't knock. I just walked in. The soft shh, 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 shh of the pencil on the paper was the only sound. He didn't look up, but his hand tensed. His rhythm broke. I had invaded his creative space. I had interrupted the genius. "Marcus," I said. My voice was calm, neutral. The voice I used to use in boardrooms right before I lowered the boom. He sighed. It was a long, theatrical, put-upon sigh, the sigh of a great man being bothered by small things. He set the pencil down, and I watched, mesmerized, as he aligned it perfectly parallel to the edge of his green drafting mat. It was a tick. A tiny, obsessive need for control. "Elara, what is it now?" he asked, his voice weary. "Did the raccoon send a message?" "No," I said, walking closer to the desk. "I was looking over those old blueprints again, for my project. I was playing the part he'd assigned me, the hobbyist. I'm just so fascinated by the foundation work," I said, my voice light and airy. "On the 1,890 plans, the north wing. It's not just a void like on your drawing. There's a room, a cold pantry and servants' quarters, it says." I was just so curious, from an engineering perspective, how you managed to seal that foundation around it while leaving the room intact. The structural calculations must have been. I paused, searching for the right word. Just brilliant. "I'd love for you to explain it to me." I smiled. I held it. I was handing him a silver platter. On it he had 2 choices, tell the truth or serve me another lie. I watched his face. The patient husband mask flickered. For one brief, terrifying second, I didn't see annoyance. I saw pure, animal panic. His blue eyes, usually so clear and reasonable, went flat and cold. He stood up. He didn't just get up. He shot up, the heavy, $1,000 ergonomic chair slamming back into the antique credenza behind him. The sound was like a car crash in the silent room. "Alara, for God's sake, stop it!" His voice wasn't a sigh. It was a roar. The sudden, raw violence of it made me take a step back, my heart leaping into my throat. "What are you doing?" he demanded. He was breathing heavily, his face turning a mottled red. Playing detective? Sneaking around? Going through my things? Questioning my work? He advanced on me, jabbing a thick finger not at me, but at the framed blueprints on his wall. His vision. "That wing is unsound, I told you that. I've told you that for 15 years. What part of structurally unstable do you not understand?" "I just asked a simple question about the blueprints, Marcus," I said, my voice shaking, but I held my ground. "The old ones clearly show a room." "They're wrong," he bellowed. "They're 150-year-old drawings from a builder who was probably drunk half the time. My plans, the engineered, the stamped, the professionally approved plans are the reality. I sealed that wing because it was a death trap. I did it to protect this house, to protect us." He was looming over me, his face a mask of rage. This was not the cool, cerebral visionary of Savannah. This was a cornered animal. And then he saw it. He saw my face. I wasn't just scared. I was watching him. He saw the accountant in my eyes, calculating. He saw that he'd lost control. His entire posture changed. It was like watching a hydraulic press release its pressure. He took a deep, shuddering breath. He ran both hands through his perfect, silver-gray hair. He even managed a short, breathless laugh. "My God," he whispered. "Look at me, getting all worked up. My God, Alara. I'm sorry." He came closer, putting his hands on my shoulders. That old, familiar gesture. The "calm down, little lady, the man is in charge" gesture. "Honey," he said, his voice now dripping with a thick, patronizing pity. "I know this is hard." My blood was boiling. "What is hard?" "Retirement," he said, like he was talking to a child. You're spinning your wheels. Your mind. It's a very literal mind. It's what made you a brilliant accountant." He patted my cheek, a gesture so condescending I wanted to bite his hand. "But you're not an accountant anymore. You're inventing problems to solve. You're creating mysteries to keep yourself busy." "I am not inventing. You're not an engineer, Alara," he said, cutting me off, his voice firm but kind. "You're not an architect. You're an accountant. You understand numbers. You don't understand vision. You don't understand space. You don't understand the complexities of structural load." He walked past me, picked up the Architectural Digest from the table, and tapped his own face on the cover. This is my world. It's complicated. It's not a neat and tidy balance sheet. You can't just audit it." He let that hang in the air, the final, perfect insult. "Now," he said, his voice suddenly bright, as if he'd solved the problem of me. "I am serious. You need a hobby. Go. Join the garden club. Volunteer at the library. Go on that cruise to Alaska with your old work friends." He smiled, the reasonable mask back in place. "Go do whatever it is you do. But please, for my sake, and for yours, stop questioning my work." He turned his back to me. He picked up his silver pencil, sat down, and pulled the vellum sheet back into place. He was finished with me. The conversation, my concerns, I was dismissed. I stood there for a full minute, just staring at the back of his brilliant head, the arrogance, the sheer, breathtaking, smug condescension. He had spent 30 years convincing me that he was the visionary, and I was just the support staff. He was the creative, and I was the literal mind that handled the boring stuff. "You're right, Marcus," I said. My voice was quiet. So quiet, I wasn't sure he'd heard me. He said, not looking up. The pencil was already moving. "You're right," I repeated a little louder. My voice was dead calm. "I'm not an engineer. I am an accountant. I'm just a literal, boring accountant who only understands numbers." I turned and walked out of the study, pulling the heavy door closed behind me. The latch clicked into place with a soft, final click. He was right. I wasn't an architect. I didn't understand vision. But as I walked down the hall to my own, smaller, less important home office, I knew exactly what I was. I was the woman who had paid for every single thing in that room, and I was the auditor who was about to find out exactly where all the other money had been going for the last 15 years. It was time to open the real books. I went to my office. It was on the first floor, tucked behind the kitchen. It wasn't a study. It wasn't a visionary space. There were no leather chairs or antique globes. There was a metal, 5-drawer, fireproof file cabinet, locked. A powerful, ugly black desktop computer with 2 massive, unstylish monitors. And on the desk, my old, heavy gray 10-key adding machine. It was the same one I'd used for 20 years at the firm. The keys were worn smooth. The 5-key had a small divot in it from my fingernail. Marcus hated it. He called it my dinosaur. He'd tried to replace it a dozen times with some sleek, minimalist Apple thing. But he didn't understand. This wasn't a calculator. This was a weapon. It was the weapon that had paid for his vision. It had paid for this house. And it was the weapon I was about to use to tear his lies down to the studs. He'd insulted my pride. He'd called me literal. He'd said I couldn't audit his world. He was about to learn just how literal I could be. I sat down, my hands steady. The anger I'd felt in his study was gone. It had been replaced by something cold, pure, and familiar. Focus. This was tax season. This was a hostile audit. I powered on the machine. I didn't bother with our personal household accounts. That was just noise. The grocery bills, the mortgage payments. That was the public-facing lie we'd both agreed to. I opened a secure browser window. I typed in the admin portal for Marcus Scott, AIA LLC. This was the real money. 30 years ago, I had set up his business. I'd filed the LLC paperwork with the state. I'd set up his tax ID. I'd structured his accounts, his payroll, his deductions. And for 30 years, I'd been the admin on the account, the CFO. He'd call me at dinner parties, with a pat on my hand, as if it were a cute pet name. He'd never, not once, thought to revoke my access. Why would he? I was just Alara, the boring, literal accountant. The one who did the hard stuff so he could create. I was in. I ran a full general ledger report for the last 15 years, since 2010. The year we'd bought this house, the year his career really took off. The screen filled with data. It was all there. Expenses, Architectural Digest subscription, $29.99. Drafting supplies from Blick, thousands a year. Software licenses for AutoCAD, thousands more. Travel, meals, entertainment. It was all there, all meticulously categorized. I'd taught him how to be a clean bookkeeper at least. But my brain, my literal brain, was already running the numbers, the totals, the total expenses. They didn't reconcile against the total draws from the bank. There was a leak, a big one, a perfectly round, consistent number pulled from the operating account every month, but not assigned to any vendor in the QuickBooks ledger. It was just owner's draw, uncategorized. Amateur, sloppy Marcus. An owner's draw just goes to him. But this was something else. He was hiding a payment. He was trying to bury it in his own equity. I clicked out of the accounting software and logged directly into the bank's business portal. There they were, the 2 accounts I'd set up. Marcus Scott, AIA, operating. Marcus Scott, AIA, payroll. And then I saw it. A 3rd account, business reserve account, XXXX, 9012. My breath hitched. I had not opened this account. It was linked to the primary account, but it was locked. A sub-account. He must have opened it himself, years ago. I clicked on it. A password prompt. I smiled. A cold, thin smile. $360,000. $360,000, paid out in secret, confidential payments. I scrolled to the top of the statement. The first payment, January 1st, 2010. It was 2 weeks after we closed on this house. It was the exact same month he'd told me the north wing was a structural nightmare and had to be sealed. This wasn't an owner's draw. This wasn't a consulting fee. This was a ransom. This was a secret. This was the sound of a 12X, 12 room that didn't exist. cashing a check every single month. My heart was no longer hammering. It was cold. It was still. This wasn't a hobby. This wasn't a marriage. This was a criminal investigation, and I had just found the money trail, $360,000. A sum that large, paid out in perfect $2,000 increments month after month for 15 years. It wasn't a fee. It wasn't a consultant. It was an obligation. It was a lease. It was the rent on a 12x12 room that didn't exist. Vendor, confidential, was the new brick wall. My literal boring CPA brain couldn't let it go. An auditor doesn't just accept a confidential vendor. An auditor finds the loading dock. An auditor gets the packing slip. So I started to watch. I embraced the new role my husband had assigned me, the bored, retired wife. I took his condescending advice. I decided to get a hobby. I started gardening. Our house had these massive, magnificent flower beds lining the front walk, facing the circular driveway. They were, of course, Marcus's design, all structural grasses and minimalist white hydrangeas. They were also horribly overgrown. So every morning, I put on a ridiculous, wide-brimmed straw hat. I put on the heavy-duty gloves. I got the foam knee pad. I looked, for all the world, like a woman with nothing better to do than pull weeds. But from that garden bed, I had a perfect, unobstructed 180-degree view of the street, the driveway, and the front door. I was no longer an accountant. I was on a stakeout. I sat there for hours, in the thick, oppressive Savannah heat, the humidity sticking my shirt to my back, and I learned the rhythms of our life. 10:05 a.m., the cheerful, sputtering rumble of the U.S. mail truck. Our mailman, Tom, always gave a friendly wave. 11:30 a.m., on the dot. The Amazon Prime van, a familiar, hurried driver who would practically throw the boxes at the door and run. 2 p.m., the heavy hiss of the FedEx Express truck's air brakes, delivering Marcus's endless tubes of blueprints. These were all too public, too traceable. Whatever $2,000 a month bought, it wasn't coming from Amazon. It happened on a Thursday. I'd been out there for 2 hours, my back screaming in protest, a pile of uprooted crabgrass beside me. A nondescript white Ford Transit van pulled up to the curb. My hands, caked in dirt and sweat, went still. It wasn't UPS. It wasn't FedEx. It wasn't USPS. It was anonymous. It had no logos, no branding, just a small, discreet decal on the driver's side door, Apex Priority Logistics. A man in a plain gray polo shirt and black pants got out. He wasn't carrying a clipboard or a big brown box. He was holding a single, white, padded, letter-sized envelope. He walked up the path, his steps quick and silent. He didn't ring the doorbell. He didn't knock. He just placed the envelope on the welcome mat, tapped something on a small handheld device, and was back in his van and gone in under 30 seconds. My heart was a fist pounding against my ribs. This was it. This was the confidential vendor. I waited, kneeling in the dirt, for a full minute, just listening. The van was gone. The street was silent. I looked up at Marcus's study. The window was dark. He was at the museum site all day. Our housekeeper, God bless her, was at the other end of the house, vacuuming the media room. I was alone. I ripped off the muddy gloves and walked to the front door. My feet felt heavy, like I was wading through wet cement. This was a line. A real, bright, federal line. You don't mess with other people's mail. But my auditor brain, my literal brain, corrected me. This wasn't the U.S. mail. This was a private courier. And as the co-owner of this house and the silent, unacknowledged investor who had funded this entire business, I had just discovered a $360,000 liability. I wasn't a wife snooping. I was an auditor securing a receipt. I picked it up. It was light, but stiff. No return address. The shipping label was printed from a thermal printer. Apex Priority Logistics Service, Specialty Medical Delivery, signature waved. Medical. My blood, which had been boiling in the heat, turned to ice. I didn't take it to the kitchen. I didn't take it to the living room. I took it to my office, my sanctuary, my war room. I closed the door. I turned the deadbolt. The snick of the lock was deafening. My hands were shaking. I grabbed the heavy silver letter opener my firm had given me for 20 years of service. I sliced the top of the envelope. A faint, sterile chemical smell wafted out. the smell of a pharmacy. Inside, there was no card, no letter, just a single folded pharmacy receipt and two small white paper bags stapled shut. I opened the first bag. A standard issue, blue and white albuterol inhaler. For asthma, my mind raced. Marcus isn't asthmatic. I'm not asthmatic. I put it down and opened the second bag. A standard amber plastic prescription bottle with the white child-proof cap. I read the label. My vision tunneled. The world shrank to the size of that white sticker. Dilant, phenytoin. 100 milligrams capsule. QTY, 90. Refills, 3. Take 1 capsule 3 times daily. I knew what Dilantin was. My father had been prescribed it for a short time after a bad stroke. It's not for a cold. It's not for asthma. It's a powerful old-school anticonvulsant. It's for epilepsy. It's for seizures. My breath came in ragged, shallow gasps. Someone in this house, someone not me, someone not Marcus, had a severe, chronic, neurological condition. And then, my eyes dropped to the patient's name. Patient, Mason, C, Doctor, redacted, on file, filled by, Savannah Specialty, Compounding Pharmacy. Mason, C. My literal brain, the one he had mocked, began to scroll. It churned past tax codes and spreadsheets and began searching the archives of time. Old parties, old dinner conversations, old Christmas cards. Mason, Mason, Mason. Click. The memory hit me so hard I had to grip the edge of my desk. 15 years ago, the massive party we threw, right after we bought this house. It was a dual celebration, the house and the launch of his new firm. The sign in front of his new office had read, Scott Mason Design, his partner. The other name on the letterhead, the one who had vanished. I remembered her now. Celia. Celia Mason. She wasn't like the other architectural wives, all Savannah pearls and breezy linen dresses. She was tiny, intense. She wore a severe black turtleneck, black jeans, and had a cloud of dark, curly hair. She just wants to be left alone. She's going to, I don't know, paint. She told me she's done with architecture. Done with the stress. Done with all of it. She made me sign a massive NDA. She's gone, Ilara. Gone. The firm became Marcus Scott, AIA. His career exploded. The museum project, the Architectural Digest covers, all for his singular vision. I looked at the prescription bottle in my hand. Mason, C. I looked at the bank statement on my screen. $2,000, month. Started, Jan, 2010. I thought of the blueprints hidden in my pantry, cold pantry and sweetnit. QTRS, 12, X12. I thought of the anchovies, the pings at 2 a.m., the sealed wing. Oh my God, I whispered. The bottle slipped from my hand and clattered onto the desk. Oh my God. He hadn't sealed the wing because it was a death trap. He'd sealed it because it was an asylum. He hadn't bought out his partner for a lump sum. He was paying her hush money, month after month. No, that wasn't right either. The pings, the anchovies, the pharmacy delivery. He wasn't paying her to stay in Europe. He wasn't protecting me from the wing. He was protecting the wing from me. The pings weren't raccoons. The anchovies weren't a new diet. It was Celia. Celia Mason, his unstable partner, was in my house. The thought didn't just land. It detonated. It recontextualized every single second of the last 15 years. The Architectural Digest cover, the genius status, the 80-hour weeks I had worked to fund his vision, it all snapped into a new, hideous focus. The $360,000 I'd found in that secret account, it wasn't hush money. It wasn't a consulting fee to a ghost in Europe. It was prison rations. It was the line item for a human being. I spent the rest of the afternoon in a state of icy, preternatural calm. The kind of calm that comes when the audit is over and all that's left is to present the findings. The kind of calm that comes before a Category 5 hurricane makes landfall. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I didn't pace. That was for later. I just printed one document, the 15-year bank statement for the reserve account. With its endless, repeating line, electronic transfer. Vendor, confidential, $2,000. I went to my office and retrieved the small, stapled pharmacy bag from the courier. I placed the bank statement on my desk, and I placed the pharmacy bag on top of it. Then, I went to the kitchen and waited. At 6:15 p.m., I heard the familiar, heavy crunch of his tires on the crushed stone driveway, the rumble of the garage door, the jingle of his keys in the mudroom, the confident, solid footsteps of the visionary of Savannah, home from another day of being brilliant. Elara. I heard his footsteps, faster now, coming down the hall. Annoyed. He stopped dead in the doorway. Elara. His voice was a sharp, confused bark. I had broken the routine. I was in his sacred space. The literal mind had invaded the visionary's temple. "What on earth are you doing?" he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Sitting in the dark? It's creepy. You're going to make me late. I have a benefactor's dinner." He reached for the main light switch. "Don't." My voice was quiet, but it stopped his hand mid-air. He let out that sigh. That long, put-upon, I'm dealing with the help sigh. He walked forward, his confidence returning. He saw the papers. "Oh, for God's sake," he scoffed. "Elara, honey, what is this now? More of your projects? Are we auditing the light bulbs?" I didn't move. I didn't look up at him. I just looked at the two items in the light. "You were right, Marcus," I said. My voice was dead calm. It was the coldest I'd ever heard it. "I'm just a literal, boring accountant. I follow the numbers, and the numbers, they don't add up." "What are you talking about?" His voice was clipped. The mask was still in place, but the patient husband was gone. This was the annoyed CEO. I finally looked up at him. I met his clear, blue, reasonable eyes. I pointed. First at the pharmacy bag, then at the bank statement. "Who is C. Mason, Marcus?" He flinched. A tiny, imperceptible tightening around his eyes. He knew that name. "And why?" I continued, my voice not rising, not breaking. "Have we been paying her $2,000 a month for 15 years to live inside our wall?" The silence that followed wasn't just silence. It was a vacuum. It sucked all the air, all the color, all the vision out of the room. He didn't move. He didn't breathe. The visionary of Savannah. The genius on the cover of the magazine. The man who had called me jumpy and bored and told me to get a hobby. He just stared at the pharmacy bag. He stared at it like it was a live grenade. The reasonable, patient, patronizing mask didn't just slip. It shattered. It fell away, and for the first time in 30 years, I saw the man I'd married. The real man. He was weak. He was terrified. And he was, I realized, utterly, pathologically, a stranger. He opened his mouth. A dry, rasping, clicking sound came out. It was the sound of a 5-year-old lie finally choking on the truth. Marcus didn't just look scared. He imploded. The visionary of Savannah. The man from the cover of the magazine, the intellectual powerhouse. He just crumpled. He didn't yell. He didn't deny it. He didn't have another, more brilliant lie ready. He just folded. He sank into the antique visitor's chair, the one I had reupholstered as one of my bored wife projects. He put his head in his hands. The sound that came out of him was a high, thin, whistling, a sound of a pressurized seal breaking. I just sat there, cold, in his chair. "How?" I asked. My voice was flat. Just that one word. He shook his head, his voice muffled by his palms. "It was an accident," he whispered. The renovation. It was an accident." "What was an accident, Marcus?" "The scaffolding." His voice was choked. "The north wall. It wasn't stable." I told her to wait. "But she's so stubborn." His voice was suddenly laced with a venomous 5-year-old resentment. Always the engineer, always checking the physics, always second-guessing my vision. He looked up at me, his eyes red and wild. "She fell. The beam. It hit her head." The room was silent. All I could hear was the thud of my own heart against my ribs. "She fell," I repeated, the numbers clicking. You told me she had a breakdown. You told me she was in Europe." She did have a breakdown," he insisted, his voice cracking, trying to grasp the old, worn-out lie. "After the fall, she was, confused. The doctors, they said. Seizures. He pointed a shaking finger at the pharmacy bag on his desk. She is unstable, Alara. She's volatile. She threatened to sue, to ruin me, to say I pushed her, to say I was negligent. I held his gaze. And were you? He didn't answer. He just stared at the floor. And I knew. Oh God, I knew. He saw the look on my face. He scrambled, desperate. I had to protect us. I had to protect the firm, our life, the life you wanted. Protect us. My voice was so quiet it was almost a hiss. By what? What did you do, Marcus? I gave her a choice, he whispered. She could. Go public. We could have a lawsuit that would ruin us both. Or she could. Be safe. Be taken care of. Safe, I said. The word tasted like ash. She was paranoid, he said, the lie getting stronger now. He was rebuilding his logic. The medication, it makes her paranoid. She developed. Agoraphobia. She thinks. The air outside. She thinks it's toxic, that it triggers the seizures. My blood ran cold. You told her that. It was for her own good, he suddenly screamed, his voice cracking. She needs the controlled environment. She's safe in there. I take care of her. I looked at him, really looked at him, the man who'd called me literal, the man who'd built his name on vision, and I finally understood. She's safe, I said. And you're a genius. He flinched. What? The Architectural Digest cover, I said, my voice as flat as a ledger. The museum. The vision. It's not yours, is it? He stared at me, his mouth open. It's hers. She helps, he stammered. We collaborate. Collaborate, I laughed. It was a horrible, dry, scraping sound. You're a vampire, Marcus. You're not a visionary. You're a jailer. You didn't just steal her life. You stole her work. You locked the talent in the wall and put your name on the door. You don't understand, he pleaded. I curate her ideas. She's too chaotic. She's too unstable. I give them form. I make them real. You're a fraud, I said. And I'm the literal wife who funded it. The 80-hour weeks, the tax season bonuses, the life I'd given up so he could create. I hadn't just been funding his vision. I'd been paying for the prison. I'd been paying for the anchovies. I'd been paying for the bars on Celia's cage. That was it. The audit was over. The last number had been clicked into place. I stood up. The heavy chair rolled back silently. Marcus flinched, like I was going to hit him. Alara, honey, listen to me. We can fix this. We're rich now. We can move her. We can get her to a real facility. A nice one, in Switzerland. I just walked past him. I walked out of the study. Alara, wait, he screamed. He was scrambling after me, his genius composure completely gone. Don't do this. You'll destroy everything. You'll destroy us. Alara. I wasn't listening. I walked through the grand foyer, past the grand staircase, through the mudroom, and into the garage. The automatic light flickered on, illuminating my bored wife gardening tools, the rakes, the bags of potting soil, and, in the corner, on the tool rack, Marcus's demolition tools. From the renovation 15 years ago. I grabbed the sledgehammer. It was heavy, solid steel. The wooden handle was smooth in my hands. It felt real. It felt literal. I walked back into the house, the heavy iron head of the hammer bumping against my leg. Marcus was in the hallway, his face a mask of white, slick terror. When he saw the sledgehammer, he shrieked. Alara, no, stop, what are you doing? He tried to grab my arm. I looked at him. I think, for the first time, he saw the real me, not the wife, the auditor, the liquidator. He recoiled. I walked past him. Down the long, magnificent hallway, past the art I'd bought, past the rugs I'd chosen, to the end of the hall, to the door. The big, heavy, solid oak door. The one with the antique, oversized brass padlock. She has the key inside, Alara. It's locked from both sides, he babbled. It's for her safety. Stop. I didn't need a key. I wasn't asking for permission. I hefted the sledgehammer. This is my house, Marcus, I said. I swung. The first hit was a dull, heavy thud. The old wood splintered. No, he shrieked. I swung again. A sharp, splitting crack. The lock mechanism shattered. I kicked the door. It flew open, slamming against the inner wall. And there it was, just like in the blueprints, not a hallway, not an unsound void. It was exactly as he'd drawn it on his plan, a solid plaster and lath wall, his structural seal, the final lie. Elara, don't. He was sobbing now, grabbing at my shirt. You don't know what you're doing. It's not safe. I shoved him off me. He stumbled back, colliding with the hall table. I turned back to the wall. This was the real fraud. The lie made of plaster. I raised the sledgehammer high. You called me. Literal. I grunted. I swung. The plaster exploded in a cloud of white, choking dust. You told me to get a hobby. I swung again. Lath splintered. A dark, black hole appeared. A smell. A smell hit me. Not of dust and rot. Of stale air and tinned fish and life. A sad, contained, unfresh life. Stop, Elara. I swung a third time, and a fourth, shattering the lath, making the hole bigger. Dust filled my lungs, my eyes. Celia. I coughed, my voice raw. Celia. And then, from the darkness, from the blackness inside my wall, a voice, a rasp, a dry, unused spiderweb sound. Elara. A pale hand, thin as a bird's claw, reached out from the darkness, grabbing the edge of the broken plaster. And in the dusty, dim light of the hallway, a woman. A pale, thin ghost of a woman, with huge, terrified eyes and a cloud of matted, dark hair, crawled out of the wall. The plaster dust hung in the air, so thick I could taste it. It was chalky, ancient. It filled my lungs, and for a second, I couldn't breathe. Marcus was making a sound, a low, keening animal sound, crumpled in the corner of the hallway. He had finally, mercifully, shut up. Celia was on her hands and knees, blinking against the light of the hallway chandelier. She was skeletal. Her skin was a pale, sickly gray, and she was wearing a threadbare gray sweatsuit that hung off her bird-like frame. I dropped the sledgehammer. It hit the hardwood floor with a deafening final clang. I didn't run to her. I didn't scream. I just stood there, my brain, my literal CPA brain, trying to reconcile the two columns, the asset and the liability. The woman I remembered, and the ghost who had just crawled out of my wall. Elara, she whispered again. Her voice was like dry leaves. I didn't call 911, not for him. I walked past Marcus, stepping over him like he was a pile of laundry. I went to the kitchen, I grabbed my phone, and I called for an ambulance. I have a woman here, I said to the dispatcher, my voice a dead, flat monotone. She's suffering from extreme malnutrition and false imprisonment. Send help. The next few days were a blur of flashing lights, quiet, grim-faced police officers, and lawyers. Marcus was gone. I didn't know where, and I didn't care. The house, my house, was a crime scene, the end of the hall blocked off with yellow tape. I was staying in a hotel, a sterile, beige, anonymous room that was the exact opposite of the lie I'd been living in. But I wasn't. I wasn't just sitting there. Before the police had sealed the house, I'd done one last thing. I'd gone back into his study, the temple, the lair, and I, the literal accountant, had conducted a final asset seizure. Behind a false panel in his custom-built cherry bookshelves, a trick I'd seen him use to hide a safe, I'd found them. 4 heavy black leather-bound portfolios. The old-fashioned kind, with string ties. I didn't need to open them. I just knew. 2 days later, I walked into St. Joseph's Hospital. The air was cool, smelling of antiseptic and floor wax. I went to the 5th floor. The nurse at the station, a kind, tired-looking woman, nodded at me. She's lucid, honey, but weak. Be gentle. I walked to room 512. The door was open. The room was flooded with unfiltered afternoon sunlight. And there, in the middle of it all, in a hospital bed, was Celia. They had cleaned her. Her dark, curly hair, now threaded with gray, was brushed and tied back. An IV line snaked into her thin, pale arm. She looked like a 19th century painting of an invalid. She was so small, so fragile, it looked like the starched white sheets might crush her. She was asleep. I sat in the visitor's chair, and I put the 4 heavy, black portfolios on the floor next to me. I just sat, and I watched her breathe. I thought about my 80-hour work weeks, my tax seasons, my life, the sacrifices I had made to fund his vision. It was a con, the longest, cruelest, most elaborate con in history. He hadn't just stolen her life, he'd stolen mine, and used mine to pay for hers. After about 20 minutes, her eyelids flickered. Her eyes opened. They weren't the terrified, animal eyes from the hallway. They were clear, intelligent. The eyes of the engineer. She looked at me, and her first, dry-lipped, whispered words weren't, "Where am I?" or "What happened?" Her first words were to me. "Ilara," she rasped. I'm so sorry." I just stared at her, my mind unable to compute. "Sorry," I said. "Celia, what are you? You're sorry." Tears welled in her eyes, spilling onto the hospital pillow. For the house," she whispered. "For living. I heard you. Sometimes. Through the wall. I heard you. Laughing." My stomach clenched. I felt I was going to be sick. He told me," she whispered, her voice cracking. He told me. You knew." The beep of the heart monitor next to her bed was the only sound. Beep, beep, beep. The world just stopped. "What?" He told me you were in on it." Her breath hitched in a sob. That. After the accident, when I fell," he said, "you both agreed that I was unstable, that I was a danger, that I was going to sue, that I was volatile and paranoid." She was reciting the exact words, the exact lies he had fed me, just from the other side. He said, "You were afraid of me," she choked out. "That the wall, the lock, that it was to protect you. From me," he said. I had to earn my keep. I had to collaborate for your protection." The air left my lungs in a single painful rush. The lie. It was perfect. It was a perfect 360-degree, inescapable piece of psychological architecture. He hadn't just built a wall. He'd built it between us. He had used me, my life, my work, my name as the second lock on her prison door. He had made me her jailer, without me even knowing I had the key. He had turned my 80-hour weeks into the proof that she had to stay, that we were angry at her, that she had to work from inside that 12x12 room to pay us back. I saw the Architectural Digest cover in my mind, his vision, his genius. "He stole both our lives, Celia," I whispered. My voice was shaking, not with sadness, but with a cold, pure, diamond-hard rage I had never felt before. I reached down. I picked up the first heavy black portfolio. I placed it on her hospital tray. Her eyes widened. She stared at it like she was seeing a ghost. Her thin, trembling fingers reached out and touched the worn leather cover. My work," she breathed. "Your work," I said. "All of it." He had it hidden behind a false panel in his study, like a trophy. She opened it. Inside, on the heavy, cream-colored paper, were the most beautiful, intricate, brilliant drawings I had ever seen. Pencil and ink. Sketches of floating staircases, cantilevered balconies. The physics she was so good at. It was the museum. It was the award-winning Schaefer Building restoration. It was everything. It was all her. He said, "They were just sketches." She whispered, tears streaming down her face, splashing onto the drawings. He said, "My ideas were too chaotic, that he gave them form." "He's a liar," I said, "and he's a thief." She looked up at me, her eyes, for the first time, not scared, not sad, but hard, the engineer, the partner. He's not a visionary, I said, my voice matching hers. He's a liability, a $360,000 liability, plus interest. I smiled, a thin, cold CPA smile. And I said, I'm the liquidator. The account is way past due. I stood up. You get your strength back, Celia. You get better. I tapped the portfolio. Because you and I, we are about to present the real audit. And this time, he's not going to be able to cook the books. And we did. We didn't just present the real audit, we filed it with the court. My boring, literal CPA brain became Marcus's worst nightmare. He, the visionary, had made one fatal, amateur mistake. He'd underestimated the accountant. He thought I would be quiet. He thought I'd be discreet, that I'd want to handle this privately to save myself the embarrassment. He thought, even at the end, that I was just the bored wife who was at loose ends. He miscalculated the assets. I didn't want his money. I wanted my money. I wanted my 30 years of 80-hour tax season weeks back. I wanted the bonuses I'd sunk into his vision. I wanted my investment, with interest. The divorce wasn't a negotiation, it was a liquidation. I wasn't just his wife. I was his primary and now hostile creditor. And Celia wasn't just his victim. She was the star witness in the lawsuit that dismantled his entire fraudulent career. The fallout was swift, total, and inescapable. He wasn't just arrested for kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, and aggravated assault. He was sued into oblivion. Those 4 black leather-bound portfolios, they were Exhibit A. Celia's stolen sketches were compared, line by line, to his masterpieces. The visionary of Savannah was exposed in a long, brutal Forbes article as the vampire of the North Wing. His genius was revealed for what it was, a parasitic lie. The Architectural Digest cover, the one he'd been so proud of, became a national joke, a symbol of his fraud. The state board revoked his license. The city museum, his brilliant project, fired him in a one-sentence public statement. He lost his reputation. He lost his name. He lost everything. He had built his entire world on 2 foundations, my money and her mind. And now, the 2 of us were repossessing the property. The first asset I liquidated was the house, that beautiful, magnificent, white-columned lie. I couldn't breathe in it anymore. I didn't want to cleanse it. I wanted it gone. I sold it at a public auction, as is. I didn't even pack a bag. I just walked out. I let the new owners, a development company that specialized in difficult properties, deal with the hole in the wall. Which brings me to today. I'm not in a garden. I'm not on a cruise. I'm standing on a stage at the Savannah College of Art and Design, and the auditorium is packed. The light is warm, and it's not coming from a single patronizing desk lamp. It's flooding the stage. I'm not here as Mrs. Marcus Scott, the supportive wife. I'm here as Alara Scott, the founder. I tap the microphone, just as I've seen men do in boardrooms 1,000 times. For 35 years, I say, my voice clear and steady, I was a forensic accountant. I was very, very good at my job. I was good at finding the numbers that didn't add up. I was good at finding the creative accounting, the visionary deductions, the lies. But the biggest fraud, the most profound, criminal embezzlement, I didn't find it in a ledger. I found it in my own home. I found it in my own marriage. I learned that it is possible to be so supportive of someone else's vision that you fund the very prison they are building for others. My money, and her mind, built an empire for a man who deserved neither. I pause. Today, that empire is liquidated, and those assets, our assets, are being reinvested. I gesture to the banner behind me. It's simple, elegant, and powerful. Today, I am endowing the C. Mason Foundation for Women in Architecture. It is funded with the entirety of the tens of millions of dollars seized from the fraudulent assets of Marcus Scott, AIA, LLC. From now on, the name C. Mason will not be a footnote. It will not be a victim. It will be the foundation that builds the next generation of female visionaries, the real ones. There's a wave of applause, but I'm not finished. I'm looking at the front row. And now, I'd like to introduce the C. Mason Foundation's chief architect and the designer of the new SCAD library expansion. And Celia walks out. She's not the ghost who crawled out of the wall. She's radiant. She's wearing a sharp, black suit. Her dark, curly hair is healthy and vibrant. She's holding a rolled-up set of blueprints. She joins me at the podium, and we stand there, side by side. The accountant and the architect. The assets, finally reconciled. The most dangerous lies aren't the ones we're told. They're the ones we accept. The lies we live with because the comfort of the vision feels safer than the chaos of the truth. Marcus called me literal. He was right, I am. Because the truth is literal. It's not a vision. It's not a hobby. It's a 12x12 room. It's a pharmacy receipt. It's a bank statement. It's the real, tangible, undeniable number at the bottom of the page. So, let me ask you, what truths in your own life are you afraid to finally audit? If this story resonated with you, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about finding the courage to tear down the wall and see what's been hiding behind it all along.